Welcome back after the Thanksgiving holiday. We'll be continuing with the Vimalakirti Sutra. And I think in the text it's somewhere in the 20s, maybe page 22. It's still the very beginning of the first chapter. So where we left off, we were still going through the various praises of the merits of the Bodhisattva. So this is probably the fourth lecture on that section so far. So the next line in this text is, we're accomplished in all the immeasurable merits. So this section is referring to the praise of the Bodhisattva's self-cultivation. So the Bodhisattva has gone through a tremendous amount of work and has cultivated to the point of becoming a Bodhisattva. So they're praising this. So we've been going through this section, as I said, a lot regarding the praises of the Bodhisattva. So why do we continue to praise merits of the Bodhisattva? So I think maybe is a good time to revisit that since we're close to the end of that paragraph. So maybe since we're in the Thanksgiving season, we could say this is something more you can think of in terms of Thanksgiving. So during Thanksgiving, you're giving thanks for someone, something, and that's not that you're praising them. So if you say I'm thankful for someone in my life or something like that, you're not giving them praise as much as you are maybe reflecting on how much it means to you or your development or your life. And some things we may give thanksgiving for or give thanks for potentially are things we avoided. So, this or that didn't happen, or I'm thankful that nothing has changed, right? Everything stayed the same. So I think in this way is a recognition, right? If you give thanks for a person, you're recognizing their love, caring, support, how much they mean in your life. It's an opportunity to sort of stop and reflect. And in this way, I think you could even think of Thanksgiving as America's meditation holiday, right? It asks you to reflect on things. It asks you to really think deeply. And this is probably the reason why it resists so much of the consumerism and commercialism that other holidays are just completely destroyed by. So for Thanksgiving, of course, we reserve all of our insanity for the following day, right? Black Friday is the insanity. So for one day, right, this is your the American Meditation Retreat. For one day, you have an opportunity to reflect. And in many ways, this part of the text is doing the same thing. We're reflecting on the virtues of the Bodhisattva for a variety of reasons. We're looking at those virtues as a tool for us to learn. We're looking at the virtues as something that's going to help us, lead us forward. We're looking at these virtues as these things are possible. Here's a model, here's an archetype for what is possible, what we can do. And in many ways that's helpful because it's telling us, okay, where we are in our meditation or our practice now, there's still more to go, but someone has gone down that path and perfected it. It is possible. And in that way, the text itself then becomes something more than just a book. It becomes an instruction manual. It becomes almost like an autobiography. I did it and so can you. But it's also something that reassures us that there's someone out there to help, right? So we have the Bodhisattva, depending on how we read it, even if only as a guide or a guidepost that there is more than just a set of abstract ideas. Here are people who've done it. So in this way, I think we can then think of the text as our giving thanks to the Bodhisattva for showing us the way, proving it's possible, having put that energy in. It's not just a list of they're so great, right? Because it can look that way sometimes when we read so much over and over and over. But in this way, we put energy into the sutra, right? It requires us to pick it up, it requires us to read it, and we read into it our own experience. So this way, it's like music or poetry. When you hear music or poetry or read it, you're reading into it, you're bringing your experience, you're bringing your emotional state, you're bringing your life experience to the text. And when we're reading these praises, it's not just, yay, Bodhisattva is awesome. It's much more of a, where am I? How do I read this text? How do I view the Bodhisattva now? From this initial concept that I had, what does that mean for me today versus what did it mean for me a year ago? Did I actually have a good understanding of what a Bodhisattva is? Why do we praise the Bodhisattva in this way? So we're both learning about the Bodhisattva, but we're also learning about what's possible for ourselves. So there's more going on than just what on the face looks like this kind of dry list of, almost like stats, right? Like athletic stats. So if you read an athlete stats, whether they're RBIs or whatever, what are the points that they per season, that doesn't do much for you. But in this way, it's not just stats. It's actually attributes that we are capable of developing, and the Bodhisattva is showing us how to do it. So in this way, I think if we look at it or we read the sutra in terms of our life experience, our energy, or an energy of thanksgiving, then we bring it to life. So there's some foreshadowing of that in the Lotus Sutra, of requiring our mind. The sutra requires that we bring our mind to the text, and by doing that, we keep it alive. And this text is no different. Probably even more so because it's very lively. But we bring something to the table, right? It's not just the book sitting there. It's not going to open its pages and project, its teaching in the air in front of us. We have to engage with it more. But at first read, it can be, wow, how many more attributes can there be? How many more praises can we heap on the Bodhisattva? So it's also good to keep in mind the Bodhisattva is not the whole time going, oh, stop, oh, that's enough, oh, really? Oh, you guys are so nice, It's not that type of praise. The purpose is much more illustrative for what we can do and what's possible for us, as well as the Bodhisattva has done this to sort of blaze a trail for us and help us along the way. So keeping that in mind, I think, is helpful, because we can kind of recast this introductory chapter as something more positive for us. So continuing with the praises, had ornamented and purified all immeasurable Buddha lands. So this is in praise of others, as the Bodhisattva has transformed them. So the Bodhisattva isn't just working on themselves, not just for us, but has worked with countless people and helped them to transform. So again, if we bring that perspective of thanksgiving to this text, we're reading not only what they've done, but how they've been successful in helping others. So this becomes now not just a self-help book, but almost like going online, reading about the book, and then reading people. I got the book and it worked really well for me. Or this method was really good. So this is an endorsement, right? So where do we see endorsements, right? Are you on the New York Times bestseller list? Are you on the Oprah's book club, right? So you read that and we're like, oh, well, because it's on that list, we'll buy it, right? So this introductory section really is, why should we read it? Why should we put energy into it? And the introduction is praising the Bodhisattva for the energy put in that was actually used to help people, and the people successfully benefited from that teaching. So part of that is like, oh, okay, so I can do it too. It'll be successful for me too. I'll get something out of it as well. So if we read it in that spirit, then hopefully we're inspired to not read it and think it's so dry, but read it and see it through the eyes of others and their experience. But I think in that way it's more inspiring. So in that way you read it and you think, well, there's a bodhisattva, there's others who benefited from the bodhisattva's teaching. That means there's future bodhisattvas. We are future bodhisattvas. Maybe one of you is already a bodhisattva, you're just hiding it. Maybe you come and read the text in the future, and we're reading your text, right? It's your life as the bodhisattva who people are reading about and benefiting from. So it's not flat in that way. It's not just here's what happened, read it. It's not only a historical record of a teaching. So the next line is unfailingly used what they saw and heard for the benefit of others. So this is in praise of the Bodhisattva's effort of seeing and hearing, or their efforts of seeing and hearing are applied to benefiting sentient beings. So this is important because how do we use our seeing and hearing? What were we seeing and hearing before we came in here? Were we applying it to the benefit of others, or were we just watching Netflix or driving, or was it more expansive? After this, what will we apply our seeing and hearing to? So seeing how maybe you can say integrated the Bodhisattva is, not only with the vow but even the actions of body for the benefit of others. Before I read that line, I thought, I haven't thought about dedicating my eyes for the benefit of others. But in many ways you are, right? You're reading the text. If you ever have the opportunity to explain it or offer, a verse or a snippet of the text to someone, you've used your eyes for the benefit of others. And in this way, we don't always use books in the same way. So this is a much deeper read on how we use a book, how we use a text, the purpose of the sutra.
And it also applies something to act of looking for things to do.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yes, applying
needs something.
Yeah, being aware of people's needs and reacting to that, definitely, yeah. So the Bodhisattva is very engaged in that, noticing when people need help, observing how they can best be helped, and then actually helping. So, yeah, almost like a fire lookout. The Bodhisattva's up there looking. Oh, that person needs help. But that's important because we can't just stay. You can't just stay in the temple. You can't stay on the mountaintop. You can't just stay inside and go, well, I really want to help people. Right? You have to go and look for them. You have to be aware. And then even more so, right? That's the highest type of mindfulness. When you take it off the cushion and you're not only aware of your own mind, but you're aware of other people. That's a very high level practice. So, in that way you can be maybe a spiritual first responder. Right? He's the ultimate first responder, right? The Bodhisattva. So I think that's a very good insight. But it's something where we have to remind ourselves, because it's easy to just say, "Oh, I don't want to get involved." Oh, that situation again. Oh, if I don't look over there, it'll go away. So the commentary goes on and says, this practice is like a light that teaches and transforms sentient beings. A light that is, so much so that they show no error in correcting or selecting the spiritual teaching that's right for people. Right? So not only do they see people in need, but their insight is so deep on that situation that they know the exact medicine, the exact antidote, the exact words to say to fix that situation or to help that person at that moment. And that's can really be hard, right? And this is actually a cautionary tale, right? The road to the hell is paved with good intentions, right? So you see something, you want to help, but do you really know what to do? So it's an opportunity for us to reflect. Do I know what I should say in this situation? I know somebody right now going through a very difficult situation, and it's one of those. There really is no answer. There's nothing you can say. I haven't had that particular experience, and so really all you can say is, I'm thinking about you, and I'm here, and it pains me to even hear that that's happening to you, right? But sometimes when we give those sort of Hallmark card responses, that are not so genuine, the intent on our part is good, but it may actually cause pain and frustration on the other person. So this is where we shouldn't be disingenuous with our, tragedy, thoughts and prayers. Right, after a while, that's it's just a canned answer, right? So what do you really feel? I think if you what are you really feeling when you hear that? And if you don't feel something, then don't say that, right? But if it's genuine, then right, that's the right medicine. Someone will feel that from you. But sometimes we feel like, I have to put on a show. So this is where the Bodhisattva is different from us, right? They're able to select the right response.
And doing so because they know the right medicine, and they can cause people to take it.
Yes.
And they're using everything they know to help people. They know exactly the right thing to do it. So then also they act as a cause of transformation in other sentient beings as well.
Mm-hmm. When I was thinking about this line, I thought, well, it's almost like rewind to grade school, and you're sitting in class, and your teacher's teaching you, and right, the teacher has to design a lesson or curriculum for 30 kids or more, and the expectation is, by the end of the lesson, hopefully you all understand. But what if the teacher could actually walk up and say, well, this is, and give you the exact right word and example that you instantly get it, and it's tailor-made for each person? That would be great. But there's just not enough humans to teach people in that way. But this is how the Bodhisattva operates. And I think in many ways, we may have our own Bodhisattva moments where we say the exact right thing, the exact right time for someone. But to get to the point where we can do that all the time for everyone, that's a very high level of practice. It also helps us reflect on where we are. Are we walking around with a lot of pretense? Are we walking around very genuine? Do we really cultivate, metta, loving kindness towards people, where they feel that in our words? You might not even have. I've been in other countries and I don't necessarily understand what people are saying, but the smile is genuine, so you feel it. Or I don't know. The other day I was, driving somewhere and you're in traffic and little kids waving, and they really just want you to wave back. And you wave back with the enthusiasm, and they're just like, there's no words, but that's what they want. They want to connect with someone. So that could be enough to just brighten their day. Right? Maybe their parent couldn't do it for them. They're bored. Mom's at the wheel, like, traffic. But the stranger could be the one that lifts their mood. So you can have a bodhisattva moment. I want to trademark that on t-shirts. Yeah. Welcome back to the Bodhisattva moment. Today with us. That'll be our talk show. But those are important. And I think our rush in the West to embrace meditation, separate from teaching, we lose a lot of this nuance. So I'm teaching the mindfulness-based stress reduction course, and I said the course has equanimity, it has loving kindness, it does not have sympathetic joy, right? It does not have compassion. Why doesn't it have those components? Because those are hard. The other ones, to some degree, you can give loving kindness to yourself. You can give loving kindness to people you love, and you can leave out other things. when we start to cultivate compassion, and you start to cultivate some of the other aspects, to really feel what other people are feeling, those are harder, and it's harder to market that. It's harder to wrap that in a package and sell it, because it is genuine, and it's left out. And so some people think forever and ever, like, that's the end all be all. These are the components. It's all about me. I'm gonna, hide away in my room and bliss out on meditation. And you really miss. So these praises of the Bodhisattva are really, opportunities for us to hold the mirror up and say, does our practice look like this? Is that even in our mind somewhere? Okay, maybe I'm not ready for that, but do I even think of these things? Do I even associate that with this practice that I'm doing? I practice yoga, and I'm really flexible, but is there more, or is it just so that I have, I look nice or something, So when we start to divorce these practices from their context and purpose, we miss a lot. And that's a good example, right? Yoga. It's easy to market fitness and beauty and attraction. It's harder to market purity and dharma and samadhi and right. So we need that. Right? This is our emotional intelligence component of life. Right? We get intellectual intelligence taught to us. We pay for it. We get a certain amount of, this is what it is to be a human being in society. These are your expectations. But there's no education for the rest of it. What happens when tragedy strikes? Did you have a class on grief? Probably not. I mean, unless you went to a religious school, but even then, not that long. Do you have a class on after you fall in love? Right? Do you have a class on, after 10 years of, relationship? No, nobody wants to. It'll be fine. Good luck. So that's what life starts to happen to us, and we realize we're woefully unprepared. So in this way, I think the teachings are helpful. But also, if you conduct yourself this way, right? You have that idea. Can I have a bodhisattva moment today? When can I do it? When do I see an opportunity to reach out to someone and share? Even if it's just sharing in their silence. How different would the world be? But instead what we see is a lot of times people saying, when can I get advantage? Right? When can, there's an opportunity for me to grandstand. Can I use this to prop myself up, market myself, or, we have this great opportunity to celebrate these people, but don't forget me. That kind of behavior. We see that a lot. And unfortunately, strangely right now, there seems to be a raft of, bad behavior coming out of the shadows. So even more so, right? If you have position, how do you use it? It's very powerful, right? And how much better the world could be if you didn't use it for manipulative purposes or just to gratify some base emotion, but instead said, okay, I have position, let me help you and you and you, and let me help you, let me connect you with this person. And then people are, really fulfilled, rather than feeling, the emotional scars of that stuff carries on and on and on. So what do we want to reverberate through the world? So that's not taught in marketing classes, though.
Well, especially not considering that compassion is not comfortable.
No, yeah, and that's why it's left out of that kind of, yeah. If you go to a meditation class, for the most part, that's left out because it is uncomfortable. Because then no one's going to come back, right? So what's the difference between XYZ meditation class and like the temple? Yeah, you're going to be asked to do things that are uncomfortable, but even if it takes you 10 years to come back, we'll still be here, right? And I think that's a big difference. So it's not, as my teacher said, the Dharma is not for sale. And that's important because it has to be available to everyone. It has to be always available. It has to be made available regardless of, what we want. It has to be made available on the lines of the Bodhisattva, which is, perfecting these virtues and merits for the benefit of others. We don't often think that way. Even a lot of the service professions have turned away from that. And so I think, we see that a lot of people who are in service professions don't feel fulfilled. Right?
Yeah. It's actually, medicine is a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons why doctors don't like being doctors, actually, is because it doesn't fulfill a spiritual place in them. And they actually can't hold compassion for their patients very well
Mm-hmm.
and do their jobs.
Yeah. In the West, the three learned professions: clergy, medicine, and law. And there used to be much more fulfillment in those positions based on the fact that you were dispensing not just wisdom, but you were, in many ways, there's a medicine associated with all of those. People are coming to all three professions with crisis, and you're helping them in a crisis. And you're doing it in a way that is supposed to uphold the highest ideals of society. And I think at the same time, what you have in all three, there's the life of the mind is available in all three. There's a scholarly and an application side. So they're essentially very fulfilling to the whole person. And we see less and less fulfillment for people who are engaged in them. So, why is that? And, a lot of it has to do with the market forces applied to them, so that the life of the mind portion is no longer of interest. There's a movement, everybody should just be a technician, almost. So, you strip away the meaningful aspects, the emotional intelligence side of people's lives, and you get a lot of social ills. So, I feel like I'm preaching. Okay, so we'll go next line. So after unfailingly use what they saw and heard for the benefit of others, and never squandered away their endeavors. Not squandering here really means that they never lose their merits. They are replete in merit all the time. Squandered, I think we use that more like financially. That's when I see that word, I tend to think money or financial or material things. But here it means they're never losing their merit. So the question then here is, do we conserve our merit or do we squander it? And that's not a question we ask often. The closest question I can think of is, at some point we all heard from a teacher, you have so much potential, or you're not living up to your potential. And we're all like, oh, right. And for many of us, that may have been grade school, some beloved teacher that we had that inspired us. But in many ways, here the text is saying, what are our merits? What skills do we have? What blessings have we benefited from? And are we spending that currency, or are we building it? Are we using it as it should be? How can we benefit society? Are we actually using it, or are we just sitting back and enjoying the fruit of those blessings? So many of us do that. Well, everyone's done it at some point. But if life is easy, then we're like, oh, great. We don't immediately think, well, how could I make it better for others? Because it's not so hard for me. So here's where the Bodhisattva is never saying, well, heck, I'm nearly enlightened. Where's the couch? I want to watch the TV. They're always using. So squandering, maybe the English doesn't give quite the right sense of what this line is referring to. So, yeah, their practice is perfected. They've reached this maximum human efficiency. And when you have that effortlessness, then what do you do with it? Right? How do you use it? So, don't squander your merit. So the final line in that, thus were they entirely replete in all merits. So, quite literally from the Chinese, there's no element of the false. Their work was not in vain, and therefore it has value to us and them. Right? So they are replete in all merit. So here it's not just fluff or mere puffery or a list of praises or you think of speeches where someone's going to be introduced or like, oh, this person's so great and they did this and they did that, and sometimes you hear that speech and you're like and other times you hear that speech and you hear from the speaker they genuinely and truly mean it, and you learn things from that, right? The person that you're about to hear from, you're like, oh, I had no idea they did that, I had no idea that they were involved in that, because they're not tooting their own horn about it, right? And you hear it from someone else because that person was really inspired, and the feeling that that type of speech gives you is totally different. So here I think at the end of this, if we read it the right way, the Bodhisattva is not telling us this, right? They're not saying, let me tell you how great I am. The text is telling us all about the Bodhisattva for our learning, for our benefit, for our education and fuel to keep going. And in that way, but they're silent about it. They're not. No, you're the best. No, you're such a great bodhisattva. No, really, you're the. It's much more. It's not something they're too busy working to talk about. So the next, since we finally finished the first paragraph of the introduction, the next portion of the text is a listing of all the bodhisattvas who were present at the assembly when the Buddha gave this teaching, and which bodhisattvas. So it's important to some degree to say who's present. This is a very common, traditional way of beginning a Buddhist text. So technically we're still in the beginning. No one's said anything yet. We have no dialogue. So this is all setting the scene. If this was Shakespeare, this would all be the introduction and foreshadowing, but there has been no dialogue. No one has entered the stage yet, so to speak. Or if anything, we're kind of zooming in. Who do we see? So our narrator is still going. So it provides this list, and that list includes Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri. So, and Maitreya, yes. So here you see the Bodhisattva of compassion, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and the future, the Buddha of the future, right, are present. And the sutra says there were 32,000 such bodhisattvas present. So how big was the stadium? So don't get too caught up on the numbers right now, because the whole sutra is about mind-bending scenarios and numbers. But we do have this setting the scene of who's present. So it goes on to say that there were 10,000 Brahman heavenly kings, and goes through the various types of heavenly beings, the descriptions, and then says that, of course, there were nuns, monks, lay people, and it includes the Eightfold Assembly. So I thought it's helpful to say, well, what is the Eightfold Assembly? So we went over that list probably about a year ago now, when we were discussing a little bit the Avatamsaka Sutra. So the Eightfold Assembly includes Devas, gods, Nagas, which are snake beings or snake kings, Yakshas, which are malevolent spirits, Gandharvas, which are celestial musicians. You'll see these in carvings, especially around Buddhist temples. They'll be floating on a cloud, and they have a lute or a flute, something like that. Ashuras, which are demigods. So the old, always is easier to point out, like Jason and the Argonauts, even as an old movie with claymation and stop motion. They have a lot of these kind of half. Hercules would be like a demigod, right? So all of the things that you find in Greek mythology. And
are these Titans?
Yes, Titans.
Okay, yeah, same.
Same ideas. Yeah. Then the Garuda, which is a golden winged bird, which are known to eat dragons. So yeah, dragons do have a natural predator. The Kinnaras, the heavenly music masters who are neither human nor not human. And the Mahoragas, the snake spirits. So these, why are they mentioned? They show up in all human culture traditionally. It's just that for some reason we stopped writing about them 1,000 years ago or so. But if you look at Native American mythology, religion, tradition, go down to Mexico, we have massive temples built to feathered serpent. So these are not uncommon for human culture as categories. So these two are present. So why they're mentioned, it gets a little bit more evident as we go through the text. If you're scratching your head about why we're mentioning all of these non-human beings, we'll get into that. Right? The text does do a little bit more of explanation. But remember, the Buddhist teaching is not limited to benefiting only human beings. It's said to benefit all beings, all creatures, all sentient beings, so anything with a consciousness. So from the lowest to the highest. And we're somewhere in the middle, right? So below us, the amoeba, right? Above us, I don't know, maybe there are other even animals that have higher brain capacity. I don't know. I haven't played chess with a dolphin yet, but I'll let you know when that happens. But we definitely have other, animal creatures who have exhibited very high levels of consciousness, and that's documented now. Apes with learning sign language, and I think whales and dolphins show quite a bit of social structure interaction. Just without the opposable thumbs. So, and again, postulating non-human creatures that also have that consciousness. So it's here to say that this is our the Buddhist non-discrimination policy. Right? Everything and anything, male or female, human or even non-human, is present and can benefit from the teaching. So we're far more expansive than LGBTQ plus, and racial and ethnic and gender non-discrimination clause. This is a species non-discrimination statement. So,
Aren't the Garuda and Fudo's flames?
yes, sometimes you see the bird. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you'll see this a lot in carvings, artwork. So it helps to know why you're seeing it. So this is my tangent on Buddhist artwork education. So if you do go to Asia, there you will see a lot of this. Very famously in front of Toji, there's a lantern, and a lot of these creatures are on the lantern in front of the temple. So not only is it beautiful, but it's also illustrating the shape of the lantern, the placement of these beings on it is, again, your welcome sign, right? All beings are welcome. So here's where we're going to do some more foreshadowing. So the text goes on to describe that there's actually 2 assemblies. So we'll have to remember back about 5 lectures. So you've got the Buddha lecturing in the garden of Amrapali. And there's another lecture which we haven't gotten to yet, which takes place in Vimalakirti's room. So most of the action in the Vimalakirti Sutra takes place with Vimalakirti. But the sutra starts and ends at this other lecture. So there's really 2 locations for the teaching, which is a little bit unusual for a Buddha sutra. So it does discuss this at the very beginning, that there are these 2 locations. So remembering again, Amrapali is this very beautiful courtesan who's accomplished in dance. And having been so accomplished, she has amassed wealth and she has a garden, and she ends up donating the garden to the Buddha and the disciples for their living. But at the beginning, she had invited the Buddha for a meal, and he went to the garden, for the meal. So this is the very beginning of the text takes place in this garden. And then we go to Vimalakirti's room. So it's just helpful to keep in mind that there's these two locations. So the sutra does get a little confusing. So having that geography established is helpful. So that's where we are right now. So it goes on to list the full assembly. So we know who's present and where they are present. Because the full assembly does not go to Vimalakirti's room. Some people stay in the garden with the Buddha. So the text goes on and says, at that time, the Buddha explained the Dharma for the congregation of innumerable hundreds of thousands surrounding and revering him. He was like Mount Sumeru, the king of mountains, rising high above the ocean, peacefully seated on the many-jeweled lion seat. He towered over the great congregation of all those who had come there. So again, honorific terms to explain the Buddha's presence. And a lot of this you actually will see in artwork. You'll see the Buddha sitting in full lotus, and there's a pedestal, and that pedestal is held up by lions, so it's referred to as a lion throne. So they're using a lot of this symbolic language as we went through before, kind of, if you're the lion, you can wander without fear and, go anywhere without fear, but your voice is heard, through the land. So the teaching has that gravitas, right, that you're bringing. So you'll see this a lot in artwork too. Like, why a lion throne? Why not something else, right? But not literally like a throne. He's not something. It's not what's the show? It's not the Iron Throne of Game of Thrones or something. Yeah. So the lion seat is not.
It's not made of all the swords of those.
Yeah. It's not literally like you go up to him and there's lions. That's not.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's too bad.
Yeah. No, that would be nice. That'd be pretty. That would be very awe-inspiring. Also, don't get too close. So that time it says, at that time there was an elder son in the city of Vaishali named Jewel Accumulation. So actually it means one with a lot of jewels. So that'll become evident as we go through. He who's accumulated many jewels. So he's not poor. He and 500 other elder sons proceeded to where the Buddha was, holding canopies made of the 7 treasures. Reverencing the Buddha's feet with their heads, they all simultaneously offered their canopies to the Buddha. So reverencing the Buddha's feet, meaning they bow down at the Buddha's feet, or sometimes they would actually, at that time, out of great respect, you touch your head to a person's feet. So that was the greatest sign of respect. So we don't have a bowing tradition in the West, obviously, but I think the closest you'll see to this is sometimes, even the Pope to this day will bring in people who are poor and will wash their feet, that sign of service. So it's not that the Buddha is like, kiss the ring. It's not that. It's out of their own awe, their own show of respect they come. It's not a requirement of some sort. But perhaps today, the two-handed handshake, or you would come to someone's house for the first time and bring a gift, or if it's a state meeting, there's an entourage, right? You can't be the president or prime minister of some place and not have an entourage. It doesn't work that way. Hey, I'm president. I'm going to come over this weekend. No, just me. No entourage. That. Yeah. Even if you're a former president, you can't just hang out with your friend here. You have to have an entourage. This is
unless you're Jimmy Carter.
True, but you still get Secret Service. So
yeah.
They've got hard hats and hammers out there with Habitat for Humanity, but yeah, you can just walk up and shake his hand, so that's good. So canopies are traditional offerings. Umbrellas are canopies. You'll see this in a lot of Buddhist artwork. A lot of temples sometimes have them built in somehow to show canopy, or you'll see a canopy over canopy over Komodachi here. So that's very common. On Koyasan today, when the chief abbot is walking, they have this huge umbrella parasol that they hold over as he walks. So partially it's just logical. If you're in India, it's hot. and you want shade. But it's also, a sign of respect to someone of high rank that you provide this. But again, why would you give someone an umbrella? If you're a wandering ascetic, you want to keep the wind and the rain, and especially the sun, mainly the sun, off of you. So to avoid fainting and, just, it's very intense, you would offer canopies. These canopies, however, are different. So you'll see it says they are made of the 7 treasures. So what are the 7 treasures? Gold, silver, aquamarine, crystal, conch shell or white coral, ruby, and emerald. So no wonder his name is Jewel Accumulation. So these are bling bling canopies. So they're pretty nice. So again, they are not. There's nobody selling tickets that says, jeweled canopy is required for entry. This is out of their own. This is a gift to the assembly. So of course, I would imagine logically, like happens now, certain things of artistic value are kept by the temple as having been gifts. So there's a treasure house, and in that way, it's almost like a museum. But at this time, of course, if those things needed to be used for the benefit of the congregation, when you get that many monks together, you have to feed them, take care of them, and it's not always practical that people are going to bring food. So you may need to purchase when you get a large group of people. So you don't want to be a burden on the local village if you need to stay nearby. So the monastery has money to take care of. So that's probably taking the jewels off. Go get food. So, not a very practical canopy. But, so here comes jewel accumulation with these lovely canopies. They're offered to the Buddha. So we get to the next stanza. The Buddha's numinous charisma made the jewel-laden canopies all turn into a single canopy, which covered the entire trilocosm. Yet allowing all the characteristics of the breadth and length of this world to appear within it. Also, in the tri-mega chilocosms, Mount Sumeru's snowy mountains, Mulchinda Mountains, Mahamulchinda Mountains, Fragrant Mountains, Jewel Mountains, Golden Mountains, Black Mountains, Iron Ring Mountains, the Great Iron Ring Mountains, oceans, rivers, streams, springs, suns, moons, and stars, the palaces of the gods, the palaces of the dragons, and the palaces of the honored gods. All these appeared within the jewel-laden canopy. Also, the Buddhas of the 10 directions, as well as the Buddhas preaching the Dharma, also appeared in that jewel-laden canopy. So there's going to be a lot to pull apart in that portion. The short thing is, what is this chilocosm? These are ancient ways of describing the entire universe. And in fact, we might say in our modern terminology for quantum mechanics, the multiverse. So this is extending to the far reaches of space, above and below in all directions, and encompassing not just the physical world, but the spiritual world and worlds that we are not even aware of. So when it gets into these mountain ranges, fragrant mountains, jewel mountains, gold mountains, black, iron ring, these are early cosmological terms for worlds beyond our known world. So if you think of it now, a lot of planets are speculated to be made from iron, and even some they speculate rain diamonds, and you'll see very similar terminology and descriptions used in the Buddha Sutras for these far off places. So when I was actually reading this, so I guess we have a new telescope that sees further and deeper, and it's especially looking at stars and supernova. And they're expecting now to begin detecting. They've applied machine learning and supercomputers to the data gathered, and they're expected to start observing thousands upon thousands of supernova a day, looking that far into space. So we look at our universe, and then you go out. Of course, right? Your spectrum is this, and so you start to parse all these little areas, and you realize that the worlds, even that are visible, are, it's mind blown, right? So that's what they're talking about, right? All of those worlds, known and unknown, visible and invisible, that at this time really were only showing up in the sutras. The Buddha is saying those world systems have Buddhas, they have sentient beings. All of those beings are now within the known realm of the Buddha. It is unknown to us as unenlightened beings. It is within the knowledge of an enlightened being. So here's a couple other side notes. So what's it like to be enlightened? Well, apparently you have a built-in Hubble telescope. So these become known to you. So it is supra-rational knowledge. You get hints about it in certain parts of the sutras. It's not always discussed in great depth and detail, but there are descriptions. But you can, reading this description, and if you read anything coming out of NASA today, you'll see a lot of overlap. And for me personally, especially when I first started reading Buddhist texts, I was quite amazed by this. It was very fascinating. It was like, oh, I get to be a physicist and cosmologist without getting a degree in physics or going to Caltech. So it's quite fascinating. So we have that. So that's what you see here. So why do you have these 500 canopies coming into one? So it says it takes some parsing. So bear with me as we go through this parsing. It says this scene of the 500 canopies coming into one has 4 aspects. So here's the 4 aspects. Uniting the 500 canopies into one is one, which then unite and cover the 3,000 worlds completely, top to bottom. Right. So uniting of the 500, covering the entire world, covering the 3,000 realms, meaning that then allow various things to appear as a response to that condition. So you can almost think, now that the Buddha has united all these worlds, other things become visible or come together. So you're knitting a connecting web between these disconnected pieces. And 4 allows the appearance of the pure lands of the 10 directions. So now not only do you have the heavenly realms, the physical realms, but also the Buddha realms are brought all together at one time. Normally not something that's all together at one time, but for the purpose of this teaching are being brought together. So how are they being brought together? I don't know. That's beyond my experience. I'm not enlightened. But I think it's safe to say that for those beings whose knowledge eyes are open, it's available and visible to them. To the Buddhas in those various realms, they are present. To the unenlightened, they're probably unaware.
You can say that.
Yeah.
Later on.
So the world is not just how we see it in the physical realm. And I can say that with confidence even because we have NASA that tells us that, right? There's a lot more than we can see. When we look up at the stars, there's a lot more than is visible. There's a lot more that humans know that I don't understand, right? It's within human knowledge, but I personally don't understand it. So this is saying there are things that are within the knowledge of a Buddha that are not within our knowledge. So this is an opportunity for us to get some insight into that. So that 4th condition that allows the appearance of the pure lands of the 10 directions. 10 directions, northeast, southwest, the northeast, southeast, southeast, northeast, those directions up and down. So you get the 8 and then up and down. So euphemism for everywhere, all directions. So those are the 4 things. Then those 4 have sub-categories or more nuanced components. So more nuanced. So the uniting the 500 canopies into one means meanings, thoughts, and minds are coming together. Meaning, the teaching is inconceivable with the logical mind. So when you see this inconceivable teaching, or even the chapter title, right? The Vimalakirti is the inconceivable knowledge. It means it's inconceivable with our mind as it is now. Not that it's totally inconceivable, right? Our minds are incapable of conceiving of it, which is why we meditate, to expand the mind and make it conceivable, right? It is eventually conceivable. It's completely conceivable for a Buddha. It's inconceivable for our mind that is very stuck and attached to this room, this space right now. And of course, I can't say this without making reference to The Princess Bride. Inconceivable. But it... You always have to have comic relief. I'm making a lot of Shakespearean references.
It's a movie.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
I know the name.
You have to watch it, yeah.
Never read Cecilia.
Yeah. So it is inconceivable for our minds now. It's completely conceivable, right, for the Buddha. So that's one. The second of the three meanings of the 500 canopies uniting, is the Buddha is the one who can conceive of it, right? So not only is a Buddha capable, but here in the assembly we have a Buddha who is conceiving of it, which is why we have the text, which in turn gives rise to this teaching, the inconceivable liberation, which is the Vimalakirti Sutra, right? So here you have this scene, something happens visually, right? These canopies unite. It's initially inconceivable, but in your hand you hold the text that unlocks this inconceivability. Is that a word? That's pretty long. We have a dictionary back there, we can look it up. Okay, inconceivability. So that's the three aspects of the 500 canopies united. So the second. So there are different practices. Many different practices are taught, meaning there are different spiritual practices you can practice. Yeah. But they have the same fruit. So this is a key teaching of the Vimalakirti Sutra, that no matter what practice you're doing, if it's reciting the Buddha's name, silent meditation, visualization, eventually they lead to the same place. They are different quality, but have the same, I should say, you may do a different quantity, but they have the same quality, right? They're going to get you to the same place. They appear to be different flowers or different ground in which they're growing, but the fruit is the same. So that's a key portion of this teaching, that there is a fundamental unification of the fruit of the teaching. So why are there so many different ways of practice? Because we're different, but the goal, right? The goal and the fruit is the same. So part of that teaching is, of course, because you have an assembly, and you've got many people in the assembly who are practicing in different ways, and they have doubt in their mind about, what about his practice? It's not the same as mine. I think I'm doing it right. He's doing it wrong. This creates schism, right? So part of this opportunity for the Buddha to, literally, this becomes a Superdome canopy, right? It's to bring everyone together. Everyone is practicing at the same time, hearing the doctrine at the same time. And regardless of how you may individually be practicing, the Buddha is giving you the knowledge at the same time. So it's a reading between the lines subtext that you all attain the goal at the same time. So it's it's very common, especially in human beings, for us to get caught up in differences. Right? Well, you're not doing it exactly right. That's not exactly right. You're wrong, right? We want to point out who's wrong. As soon as we learn a little bit of information, well, you're doing it wrong. We just naturally find ourselves doing that. So this is one of the ways the Buddha is, I guess, disabusing us of that notion. And then I'll do the last one and then we'll end here. So the third component, the canopies coming together as one have the effect of dispelling the various different opinions, especially of the lay people, regarding them coming together. So that exact notion, right? The whole point of them coming together is especially to tell the lay people. The bodhisattvas, I think, understand, obviously, but the assembled lay people have this doubt. And a lot of what the Vimalakirti Sutra is teaching is, though you see things that are different, doesn't mean that they're wrong, doesn't mean that is a reason for schism. You have to use more discriminating awareness rather than the logical mind that just sees the differences. What is the fruit of that practice? What energy is being put into that practice? That's really what's important, not the superficial differences. So, think of this like the Olympics. Everybody comes into the stadium. Everybody has different uniforms. Every team size is different, and they're holding different flags. But you're united under the Olympic rings for that day, for that period of time. And so, in many ways, during the Olympics, you're all Olympians. Right? It doesn't matter if you practice shot put or long distance running or whatever. At some point, you're all Olympians. And I think in many ways, this is one of those scenes where the Buddha is bringing people together, and in fact, not just people, but everything throughout the entire world, and saying, we had different ways of practice, but the outcome is the same. The fruit of that practice is the same.
And, okay, so in the last condition you spoke of, can't be coming together to allow the dispelling of opinions amongst the lay people. So is that essentially in this space that he's creating, he's allowing the people who can't normally perceive these spiritual things, suddenly they have access to this because he's allowed this thing to happen. He's created this space in which the totality of the world is being able to be perceived by them.
Yes.
Because later on they do talk about those who can perceive and those who can't.
Right.
So he's allowing the space for those who can't perceive to be able to begin to have
see
an
it.
experience
Right.
of it so they can, okay.
And in that way, it's a teaching, right? So it will evolve. It's not just, I created the canopy, so you have it, you got it, right? No, you still have to illustrate all the points and go through the mind-bending thought experiments.
Right.
But and again, a lot of foreshadowing. This is all foreshadowing. So it's saying that ultimately that's the meaning for him doing this. Otherwise, we read this and we're like, what's with the canopies? So this is the purpose, right? It's an announced, I guess, illustrative purpose for doing this.
Can I ask another?
Of course.
So that makes me curious. So following this occurs. It seems like in everything there's cause and effect. There's an underlying watching of karma and all this. So the karma that leads to this happening is the laying of the offering too.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is there more commentary about? Did they ask for something? Did they ask for teaching? Is this just the teaching that was what he saw needed to be taught?
Well, no.
How does that initiate
Right.
that?
So the next paragraph or so gets into jewel accumulation's own spiritual attainment.
Okay.
So jewel accumulation, of course, as is often the case, is not just that in a sutra the question triggers answers that are beneficial for everyone. Often it's the case that there is spiritual attainment far beyond what appears to be present. And so knowing that this teaching is going to be given, they're playing a role. So this is triggering an opportunity. But jewel accumulation is, let's say, in on the... it's not a joke. It's part of one of the players. It's not just happenstance. It's not like, oh, canopies. Okay. It's definitely, I'm sure jewel accumulation is aware it's on some level that this needs to happen and brings the canopies. So it's not just happenstance.
Yeah, it could be.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Which is often the case when, and so there's, the Vimalakirti is similar to a lot of the other sutras where it sometimes says the Buddha caused someone to ask the question,
Mm-hmm.
or defers to someone else to ask or have the dialogue. So it becomes more again, it's a type of skillful means. So if people see it in this way, if people experience it in this way, that's transformative. If the Buddha just lectures constantly, sometimes it's not as transformative. But if people see someone that looks like them come and their offering is transformed, they have a different perspective on what they're learning. So it's about putting people in the right frame of mind so they can actually learn more than just giving them the knowledge. So sometimes the situation is as transformative as the information. But yes, there is a whole, we will get to, jewel accumulation's own spiritual attainment. So he leads in these other people from the city who aren't even aware of his attainment. So it's mentioned very briefly, but that's the subtext to why the canopies and this opportunity, and also why we have two assemblies.
Oh, interesting.
So when we go to Vimalakirti's room, we've got the Bodhisattvas and Ananda, and then when you're at the other assembly, you have a lot of people from the city and lay people. So you've got two assemblies. So it's almost as if people start here, the others go there, they're back here watching what's going on over there.
In the whole sutra, there's teachings for those who are spiritually awakened and the teachings for those who are not yet spiritually awakened.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's what I understand.
Yeah.
The text a little bit. Okay.
This would be a really good one to almost have like an animation, right? So why do we start together? One thing is happening over here for this large group of lay people, many of whom, logically, right, probably the first time they've heard the Buddha talk, but they happen to be at the right place at the right time. Well, not really. They have the spiritual roots to be present. And then you've got the real meat of the text, which is over here in Vimalakirti's room, right? They're sent to go visit him. But that's why the text is very unusual. It's actually quite interesting. But it's an unusual sutra in that respect. Sometimes people go off where there's another vision or something like that, but to have almost two locations is a little bit, you don't see it as often. So this is all foreshadowing, but we'll get to that. But we're out of time. But that is why I said some of this is in the commentary and some was not fully translated. So
if we have a moment, can we talk a little bit more just about the concept of canopy? Because something that's been very curious to me, because I see it a lot in imagery.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I've read it before. This is the first time I that concept has ever been kind of extrapolated.
Absolutely.
So originally, superficially, the first thing I thought, and this isn't, I think, wrong, but clearly there's more to it, is simply refuge. Right? That you're providing refuge to people. Mm-hmm. And so in this instance, he's creating this canopy which all sentient beings in all multiverses are covered, and in which these sentient beings in front of him can perceive these other sentient beings. So this is a Dharma refuge.
Yes, and that actually, we go on to say so there's 3 components and 3 levels of each component. The third level of that component is completely spreading over the entire universe, spreading the compassion of the Buddhas to the 6 realms, so meaning the 6 karmic destinies, and then spreading throughout the entire Dharma realm. So that is specifically, when we start to talk about the various destinies, we're saying hell realms, the heaven realms, because we are still in samsara suffering, that this is actually an extension of compassion from the Buddha, right? To provide the teaching to, those who are in the depths of suffering, those who are in the heights of pleasure, yet still there's something that needs to be transformed in them. So that is in the
and
anticipated.
Part of that compassionate teaching is helping people to see what is true.
Of course.
To see reality, the whole of reality.
Right.
As it is.
Because if we go back to the praises of the Bodhisattvas, one of the deeper praises is that they transform people so that they want to practice, that they see through their own, they realize, oh wait, what I'm doing is not helping me. Mm-hmm. So I want to practice this, not them kind of guilt tripping people into it.
Right.
So you have to lead people to see it so that they want to transform. And then they put the work in. So in many ways, the show, right, the canopies, is something awe-inspiring. But it's not just on, but first you get people's attention, and then you create something that you provide the teaching. And so that it's the same reason why, you go to Koyasan, and many of the buildings look very humble, they're very small, but the Hall of Lights is very amazing, even today. But at the time, to see, in the 800s or 900s, to see so many lanterns, to go through these huge cypress forests and massive trees, just like here in Oregon, there's big trees, and then you see in the distance this huge glowing building. It's the experience of that is something that was transformative for your whole life. So people have something to hold on to, and they remember they want to practice. So I think in many ways, this is one of those scenes where you have something that literally brings everyone together, literally extends, literally is a compassionate act, but also grabs people's attention rather than just, I'm sitting under the tree today, I'm going to lecture. But symbolically also has a lot of nuance in terms of what it means. The sutras are always like this. There's, every time you read it, you're going to get something new. They're not flat. They're not, this happened and the guy came in and he asked this question and they said that. There's a lot of nuance. And that's good to the degree that we can read this text, years and years from now and still find wisdom in it. It's good to the degree that it's adaptable, right? I'm sure 100 years ago, likely nobody was comparing it to supernova, right? So it's very adaptable in that respect. And so people, again, see it from a different perspective because they're living in a different time. But at the same time, there's a aspect of what's within the realm of human experience and what isn't. And the Buddha is bringing those two things together, showing us what's in our human experience and telling us there's a lot that's not within our human experience. And that's also inspiring us to look deeper. So, ergo, this overspreading canopy that unites all realms in all directions, including karmic destinies. So,
thank you.
Yeah. So, dedicate the merit this evening.